Welcome to all our friends and members of the ILA for our new episode of our talk show, coming live to you from New York City here, Dr. Mariana Figueiro. She is, she used to be at the Lighting Research Center at Rensselaer, but she's now at the ICANN School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where she heads the Center for Health and Lighting, for Health and Lighting Research. And for those of us who are in, who are in this part of the lighting field, which is circadian architectural lighting, she has been the front runner in all the research done, especially with night shift workers and incidences of breast cancer and many other fantastic research topics that she has been active on for over 20 years. So it's really a pleasure to have Mariana here with us. Welcome, Mariana. It's great
Thank
to
you,
have.
Jorge. Thanks for having me. You are always so kind, so I really appreciate it. And I'll be sharing my slides with you. Hopefully you can see it.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
good. All right, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about light and health and how we can apply to help with improve health and well-being. I'm going to focus on two areas that we've been very much involved in. One is with Alzheimer's disease patients, and the second one is with cancer patients. So the premise of the work that we do is based on circadian rhythms, which are every rhythm in our body that repeats at approximately every 24 hours. Circa is about D is a day. We have a biological clock in the brain that will generate and regulate those circadian rhythms. In a way, we don't really need the external environment to continue to have these circadian rhythms, except that if we don't have any cues from the environment, those rhythms are going to run with a period slightly longer than 24 hours. So in humans, our circadian rhythms run with a period on average of 24.2 hours. So what light or light dark patterns do, they synchronize our biological clock to exactly 24 hours so that we are entrained or synchronized with our external watch. So that's really the importance of receiving that very robust light and dark daily so that you can reset your biological clock daily. Now, if you don't receive enough light during the day, or if you receive too much light at night, which, for example, may happen with shift workers, for example, we can be what we call circadian disrupted. And that's very well known, obviously, when we travel multiple time zones, we feel that jet lag. And that jet lag is really a desynchrony of your biological clock with the local time where you are. So slowly, with the new light dark patterns, you're going to be resynchronizing to the new light dark patterns, and then you can overcome jet lag. Now, when it comes to shift workers, for example, they are in constant jet lag because they are on for 2 days, off for 3 days, on again for 2 days, off again for 3 days. So they're constantly jet lagged. And these are some of the negative effects of shift work or of anyone that would be disrupted. It goes from very simple things like feeling sleepy or reduced performance, all the way to increased risk of cardiovascular disease, reproductive effects, increased risk for diabetes, obesity, and even cancer. And there's actually a lot of work being done looking at the negative effects of shift work on increased risk of cancer, especially breast cancer in women. So one of the very well-known circadian rhythms is the sleep-wake cycle. So you're supposed to be, as a diurnal person, you're supposed to be awake during the day, asleep at night, and that's supposed to be happening every day. So your sleep-wake cycle is actually influenced by two main processes. One is what we call the circadian, And what that is your biological clock in the brain sends you an alerting signal during the daytime hours and a sleeping signal during the nighttime hours. And then we have what we call the homeostatic system, which is really a sleep pressure. The longer you stay awake, the greater is that homeostatic pressure or sleep pressure. So what happens at night before you go to bed, your biological clock shifts. It starts sending you, instead of an alerting signal, it sends you a sleeping signal. And you have very high sleep pressure because you've been awake for many hours. So that's sort of a perfect storm, and you fall asleep and you remain asleep for 6 or 8 hours consolidated during the nighttime. Now, if you misalign those two systems, like it happens, for example, in shift workers that are trying to fall asleep at night, fall asleep during the day and stay awake at night, you have a lot of difficulty in falling asleep, maintaining sleep, and having a consolidated 8-hour sleep time. So I guess the biggest question is, when we started studying about the importance of light on health and well-being, obviously sleep comes to the top because it's something that we know we all need. We don't always know why we need to sleep. And there's a lot of theories now, but it's something that we always say that if we didn't have a very good reason for sleeping, it would have been one of the biggest mistakes of nature. And the reason is you're completely dissociated from your environment when you are asleep. So you're really in danger, especially animals that are prey. I mean, they are really in danger, but yet they need to spend some time sleeping. So it has to be a very important reason why we sleep. And there has been some sort of hypothesis put forward and a lot of new work being done in the past few years. And one of the main hypotheses is that sleep cleans up the debris in the brain that we accumulate during wakefulness. So it really is your lymphatic system. It sends some of the spinal fluid into the brain, and it cleans up the brain, basically. So if you're not sleeping well, or if you are spending nights awake, what you're doing is you are minimizing that process of cleaning up the brain. And one of the hypotheses is that this has negative health effects, including the increased risk for Alzheimer's disease, which really is plaque accumulation in the brain. And if you don't clean the brain, you can facilitate that plaque accumulation. The other area that there has been a lot of work in, it's understanding how sleep promotes learning and consolidates memory. So there has been studies where you learn a task in the morning, you repeat the task in the evening, you do pretty much the same. You learn the task in the evening and you repeat the task in the morning with or without sleep. And when you repeat it with sleep, you actually do better. And when you repeat it without sleep, you do worse. So that's a good lesson for us who stay awake, pulling an all-nighter. It's probably a bad idea. Was there a question or no?
No, we're good for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's all right. I just heard something. I didn't know what it was. So there are, again, consequences of sleep deprivation, which are very similar to consequences of circadian disruption. You have reduced performance, you have increased risk for diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, depression, Alzheimer's disease. And there has been even some studies showing that people that are at risk for falls have increased risk when they are sleep deprived. And it sort of makes sense because you are a little bit disoriented when you're not after a good night of sleep, or when you didn't have a good night of sleep. Now, we did a survey during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was really to understand how important light during the day was for helping people sleep better at night. And this really stemmed from a lot of the research that we had done in federal buildings with General Service Administration and in other environments, where we show that if you are in dim light during the daytime hours, you tend to sleep worse at night. So you really need to have higher amounts of light during the day in order for you to improve your light at night. So the question was, well, we're all in lockdown, we're all at home, some of us are working in our basement. Are we disrupting our sleep more because we're not getting enough light during the day? Or what is that relationship between how much light we're getting during the day and how much sleep, and what's the quality of sleep at night? So we got the response to over 700 people, and we used in the analysis those that were employed but working at home, or were unemployed and staying at home. So this is the at-home light exposure. So we asked them to rate, and obviously it's a survey, we couldn't do any light measurements, but at least it gives us an idea of what people feel like if they are in a very dim or a very bright space. And we clearly see that if you look at these 5 graphs, the 4 graphs at the top are 50 would be sort of a normal distribution. If you reduce, if you go below 50, it's better. If you go above 50 is worse. And then the last graph, it's the opposite. It's positive affect. So above 50 is better. I'm looking at above 50 is better. It actually the thing is reversed here. So above 50 is better, below 50 would be worse. So you see very clearly here that as you increase the amount of light you receive at home, you improve your sleep, you reduce your anxiety, and you reduce your depression, and you improve your positive affect. So it's very nice because all of all of the questions in the survey they went in the right direction. We also looked at the time spent outdoors.
Hey, Mariana, quick question on the
Yeah.
previous slide.
Yeah.
We are saying that that is the amount of light exposure during the day, like during sunrise, sunset. It's not, okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah. So what we did is we had them rate how much light are you getting during the day, and then we also have them rate how well are you sleeping, what's your sleep-related impairment, what's your anxiety, and then we did the correlation. We looked at the correlation between how much light you're being exposed to and how that affect the responses in the survey.
Got it.
And here's the same thing with the time spent outdoors. So the more time you spent outdoors, which means you're getting a lot more light, the better you are sleeping, the less anxiety you have, the less depression, and the more positive affect. So again, 1 to 2 hours was sort of the cutoff. Less than that, people were starting to have sleep problems. So based on that understanding that light during the day is important, one of the areas that we have been working with, and that's a project we did with a National Cancer Institute, and Acute just built us the fixtures, was looking at the impact of light during the day on cancer and cancer fatigue and sleep and entrainment in cancer patients. So just a little bit of a background, we know that cancer and circadian disruption, compared to cancer-free controls, the people that do have cancer tend to be more disrupted. So when you measure their activity rhythms, you see that cancer patients are more disrupted and they tend to have a greater amount of fatigue. They also, that also happens in advanced diseases, okay? So it's not just in the beginning or during the chemotherapy, but it's also throughout the course of the disease, the cancer patients tend to be more disrupted and more fatigued. There has been some relationship, obviously, between fatigue and sleep, and that study was done or a few studies were done in breast cancer patients. And what they found was that higher fatigue was correlated with poor sleep. Now, fatigue and sleep obviously are related, but they're not the same thing. A lot of people say, I had 8 hours of sleep at night, I slept and am fatigued. So cancer patients have a certain type of fatigue that it's very different than sleep deprivation alone. On top of it, they don't sleep well. So they have the fatigue and they have the sleep disturbance, and those two things really combine to make them extremely tired. So what happens when you're extremely tired? You don't go out, you don't get light. And that's exactly what we see. So this is a graph showing a relationship between the minutes above 1,000 lux per day and the general score fatigue. So a higher number here means that the person is more fatigued. So what you can see is very nicely, as you increase the number of minutes in bright light, you reduce the fatigue. Again, underscoring the importance of having bright environments during the daytime hours. Now, it's very interesting because it doesn't affect just the patients. It also affects the caregivers, because you're having a patient that is fatigued and tired and have poor sleep quality, and you end up having also a caregiver. So if you can improve the sleep in the patient, you're also improving and helping the caregivers. So what we did is, this is a project we did here at Sinai. It was actually before I joined Sinai. I had a collaborator here, and we investigated the impact of that light. We call it CS, or circadian stimulus, which is really a light that affects the circadian system. It tends to be a little bit more bluish white. It was highlight levels. It was about 1,000 lux at the pillow, but it was a warm color light. It doesn't have to be a blue enriched or look sterile or anything like that. It was a very nice warm color light. And we exposed the patients from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And we collected data on a bunch of things, including circadian entrainment, sleep, fatigue, depression, and so on. So 30 patients received that active light or bright light, and 30 patients were controls, where they received the fixtures, but it didn't really deliver a lot of light. And what we saw here, these are the results that we found with the white light. With the melatonin levels. So baseline was prior to the transplant, and these are myeloma transplant patients. They stay in a hospital for 2 to 3 weeks. So we collected the data prior to them getting into the hospital, and then we collected the data the day before they were discharged. And you see that there was clearly a increase in the melatonin levels in those receiving bright light, suggesting that they were more entrained, because you typically have high melatonin levels at night when you are asleep. And there was a decrease in those levels when they did not receive that bright light, suggesting that these subjects were probably disrupting themselves by being in the hospital for that long period of time without receiving the light. This is also the results with the depression. So this is a CSD scale, is a depression score. And a high number means a person is more depressed. And the red line is when they were exposed to dim light, and the blue light is when they were exposed, the blue line is when they were exposed to bright light. And you clearly see that there's a significant reduction in the depression scores with the patients that were in the bright light exposure. So it didn't just affect sleep and circadian entrainment, but it also affected mood. The second area is the Alzheimer's disease. And we've been working with a lot of Alzheimer's patients that tend to be in nursing homes, which is very, very dim light environment. So this is one of the studies we did. It was a 14-week study. So we had a baseline data collection. We had 4 weeks of an active lighting intervention, which is a bright light. Then we had a washout period, and then we crossed over. So those that received bright light in the first phase of the study received the dim light placebo in the second phase of the study. We recruited 46 patients, and those were all patients that were in long-term care facilities.
And Mariana, sorry to interrupt, a quick question. Are there any negative side effects of adding more light in such situations?
No, I mean, we actually were monitoring for that, especially with the Alzheimer's patients, to see if there
Uh-huh.
was any agitation or any, they say that manic depression, people bipolar manic depression may have a negative effect, but we did not see any negative effect in our population. It is really like going outdoors,
Right.
think about it. So if it's well done, it's not glary or it's not uncomfortable, there shouldn't be any negative effect. As long as you're giving it during the daytime hours and you're avoiding it at night. Okay.
So
So
the spectrum of light that you were talking about, you said 1,000 lux and it was warm.
yes.
And of course, that's color temperature. But is so the spectrum of light is clearly important, right? With your circadian stimulus, right?
Well, it is part of it. If you have high amounts of light, the spectrum becomes less important. If you have lower amounts of light, then the spectrum can make a little bit of a difference.
Fascinating. Understood. Okay, thank
Okay?
you. Right.
So
That
amount makes a bigger difference than spectrum. Okay. So what we found was very interesting with these patients, Alzheimer's patients. We did see a significant improvement in their sleep disturbances, a significant improvement in their depression scores. So if you see here, you have the baseline, you have the active lighting intervention, then you have another baseline, and you have the control lighting intervention. And this is sleep disturbances. So a higher score means the person is disrupt or have sleep disturbances. So they all started with sleep disturbances because anything above 5 means a person has sleep disturbances. And then they reduced that with the bright light, but not as much or not significantly with the control light. And then if you take the difference between baseline and active and baseline and control, you see that there's a much bigger difference when you receive that bright light. Same thing with the depression scores, and same thing with the agitation scores. So clearly the light helped them sleep better, reduce depression, and reduce agitation. We then, we then followed these subjects for 6 months. So obviously it was very hard to do a crossover study there. So what we did is we had a baseline and every subject served as their own control. So we then collected data at weeks 3, 9, 17, and 25. And again, we had all day of light exposure and we collected 47 data on 47 patients in long-term care facilities. And the results were absolutely, I think, amazing. So this is again the sleep disturbance score. They start with a high sleep disturbances and it keeps getting better to a point that after 6 months, they are below the threshold for having sleep disturbances. Now, 6 months, these are patients with um, sort of moderate to severe dementia. So they're getting worse in their dementia, and yet they're improving their sleep with the light. Same thing with the depression, and same thing with the agitation scores. So one of the things that I keep telling people, and these are some of the examples of things that we use, for example, for Alzheimer's patients, we use the light table because they sit around tables all day, they look down, it's a perfect way to deliver the light. So one way is we need to think about comfort. How are we going to deliver that light in a comfortable way? And getting the lights all from the ceiling is probably not the best way to do it. So think about plug-ins, think about things you can put close to the eye that you can deliver that light in a more comfortable way. And if you can, go outdoors. Go outdoors for 1 to 2 hours every morning, and that does the trick. Now, we've been working with developing an app that you measure your light exposure, you measure your rest activity rhythm, and then you talk to an app where the app will tell you when you need light and when you need to remove the light so that you can maintain that circadian entrainment. So that's, I think, where we're going to go in the future with more individual light exposures. So just to summarize, the circadian rhythms are the platform for all biology, and then light does promote entrainment or synchronization with the local time on Earth. Now, light also has an acute alerting effect, which I didn't have time to talk about it, but think of light also as a cup of coffee. Any time of day and night that you are exposed to light, you will have that alerting effect. So that's another trick that you can get with lighting. So I do want to acknowledge the sponsors of the project and you for your attention, and my contact is there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mariana. This is so informative, and your work is such a benchmark for the industry. And I'm sure there are going to be questions coming in, but there are a few of them that have come into me as direct messages, and I'll start with that if that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely.
So the distinction between spectrum um, and amount of light, is there a
Yeah.
balance? Like, for example, if I take red light or reddish light and I give you 5,000 lux, right? And I reduce the red to it not being 100%, but say 20%, then am I supposed to take the 5,000 up or down? I mean, how does the balance between the two work here? Between
Yeah.
spectrum and intensity.
Yeah. I mean, here's how it happens. You have you are more sensitive to blue light. Okay, so
Mm.
short wavelength light is what you're most sensitive to. So if you use narrowband blue, you need very low amounts of light. Okay, if you're using white light and you think of a white light, a polychromatic light that goes from 2700K to 6500K, for example.
Mm.
Okay, the balance there is about twice the effectiveness. So you really have to say you need about 350 lux of a 5000K and you need about 500 lux of a 2700K. Now, when you think about that, bringing your computer or your light source a little bit closer, you take that into consideration. So the amount will, just by bringing that, without even changing spectrum, just by bringing it closer, you get that amount of light that you need to change. So when you're talking about white light, you have very little change in the spectrum. Now, to your question about if you reduce the red and if you keep the blue, you can reduce the light levels because you're more sensitive to blue. Okay?
Mm. You can reduce the light levels because yeah, you have more.
You have
Ac-
more blue.
yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But is there like is there a formula that you can follow? You have to go back to because many of us don't use the CS formula. So if you were to give them a rule of thumb saying that if you increase you can't do that. You have to do the circadian stimulus.
Twice, yes. Typically, you have to do it, but just rule of thumb, twice the effectiveness from a 2700K to a 6500K. So 300 lux for a 6500K, about 500 lux for a 2700K. Now, it's all here at eye level. That's the most important thing. Light has to reach the eye.
Right. Right. Great. So this the next question is the app that you referred to. Is that something that kind of dovetails onto a Fitbit or that kind of a platform, or is it a
Not
standalone?
Not
Yeah.
yet, but I think eventually, sure, it could be. It's an app that goes on the phone and talks to, a device that would have the ability to connect with it through Bluetooth or whatever. But it's not there yet. I mean, we really don't develop the the technology. We're working on the math that goes behind it. Once we have that sorted out, it can probably be implemented in different ways.
So you could probably have a sensor on your wrist, which is part of your watch.
I mean,
That
arguably, your Apple Watch eventually could be something doing that.
Yeah, and it connects to Alexa or Siri, and Alexa says, "Go outside right now."
Yeah, yeah, you need more light. And then if you can't go outside, it will correct itself and tell you what you need to do next because you didn't get that light. So it's sort of like a coach for your, light sort
Yeah,
of diet, whatever.
because they already know what the weather is outside and where you are. So if it's overcast or it's raining or it's
Yeah.
snowing, then they will like a coach, be
And
able
it
to.
needs to know what you're getting indoors too. So if you're too much indoors, you need to have a light sensor to be able to know what is it that you have indoors and how much do you need to complement what you had indoors.
For sure. That's quite incredible, yeah, that you could have a light coach that
Yeah.
helps you with your rhythms so that you
It's
can.
like diet, exercise, and light. Those are the sort of the three legs.
That's great. Diet, exercise, and light.
Yeah.
Love that. So the next question that's come in is the work that you did with the cancer patients. Uh, is that I mean the data? Where can we find the data for that? Is that on your
We
website?
have we have one paper. Well, we have a couple of papers that were published. So if anybody wants that, just send me an email and I'll send you the reprints of the papers.
Fantastic, fantastic. So that's that question. And what is your next big project now that you have moved to this great new institute called Mount Sinai? What is the big project that you're working on now?
Well, there's actually a lot of opportunities. We continue to do the work with the Alzheimer's. We're expanding a little bit to look at flicker lights at 40 hertz to look at gamma entrainment in the brain, which has been shown to improve cognition as well as um, help with reducing some plaques in the brain with Alzheimer's patients. So we're planning on starting that. We continue to look at the impact of circadian disruption on cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So we're doing some work on that. Yesterday, I had an amazing call with, we have a center here for people with spinal cord injury.
Mhm.
These are people that have depression, have sleep problems, have a lot of pain. So we're very interested in looking at light as it may impact pain because there has been some work being done with that.
Mhm.
Um, so we have, I mean, we're starting to look at brain imaging. So what is happening in the brain of Alzheimer's patients with the lighting intervention, so we can understand a little bit what's going on. So there's a lot of opportunities to expand and implement, and we're also talking about maybe doing some work inside the hospital. So implementing some of these lighting solutions
Oh,
for
wow.
patients inside the hospital. So
That's fantastic. Yeah. So are you also then, I mean, you said gamma. So are you also looking at other waves or like alpha, beta, and delta,
we
etc., or just gamma?
Yeah, we look at that for alertness, but apparently there's something very specific with the 40 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just the 40 hertz, it's not even all the gamma range.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been shown that if you have that entrainment of 40 hertz, that you actually have better cognition. And what we have a paper that we published recently where we show that if you flicker the light at 40 hertz, you
Mm-hmm.
actually see a very strong increase with your gamma power in the brain. So we have been able to measure that. So I guess the next step is, does that help Alzheimer's patients with cognition? And does that help minimize some of the brain plaques with Alzheimer's patients?
So you're not working with alternating binaural sound that you have 40, 32, 40.
Well,
Or
it's
still
it's
40?
a it's a it's kind of it's not exactly that, but it's in the same sort of range of work for that.
Okay. One of the guests has put in a comment saying that photon wave would work great. It can be at 40 hertz. Guessing that's a uh, device that is manufactured. If the guest could, there you go. I could offer you to try it out.
Yeah,
Photon wave.
I'll check it out for sure. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I love when that happens. Uh, fantastic. So, Thank you, Mariana. This was so informative. So
Thank
much
you. Thanks for
information.
having me.
Of course, it was such a pleasure. Hopefully, both of you would come back and be our guests again. Keep us posted on how you're doing with all this research because it's so
All
exciting.
right. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no, we
yeah.
will. Absolutely.
So, on that note, a big round of thanks to both our guests today, Dr. Arzan Surazakov and Dr. Mariana Figueiro from two different parts of the world, for all of our guests from many different parts of the world. This is our bi-weekly talk show. We do it every alternate Wednesdays. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks with another two stalwarts in their field, which is art in the built environment and art for public health. So hopefully you will join us again in 2 weeks. And just a quick housekeeping note. We will be posting this on our YouTube channel of the ILA, International Light Association. So please stay tuned. Please subscribe to the channel and press the bell for so that you are notified when the new videos are posted. And to all our guests and our members and our friends who have sent in your wonderful comments about what we are doing with the show and also the constructive feedback. We are very thankful. Please feel free to send us more information on what you would like us to cover in the next season, and how we could improve um, our show. So, on that note, big round of thanks also to our production team, led by Anup, who's currently in New Delhi, and Justin, who's here in New Jersey. So, we've been working quite smoothly, and hopefully, you will enjoy the upcoming shows as well. And we look forward to staying in touch with all of you. See you again in 2 weeks. So, bye for now.